for questions. So does anyone, thank you, John, for this awesome presentation about the bond referendum. So I'll give everyone a minute to unmute themselves. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask or type it in the chat.
Hey, John, this is Eve. I don't really have a question. It's more of a statement. But I'm really delighted to hear that there's not a whole lot of, or if any, opposition. And hang on, let me put, and as a parent, I can say that all 4 of those bond issues are meaningful and important to me. I live on Milton Road, and my son went to Northern High School. And I'm with the Friends of the Library, and I'm a passionate library booster. Also used a lot Museum of Life and Science like crazy when my kids were growing up, and my daughter's going to Durham Tech. So all I can say is go Bond. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Eve. Are there any other questions?
Sorry, I hadn't unmuted myself. This is Diana, John, and I wanted to ask a question about these bonds. Do they go on the bond market?
Yes, they do. So Durham County, and thank you so much for your question, because this allows me to zero in on a few pieces that I left out. So Durham County has a AAA bond rating, and so that was just reapproved by Standard & Poor's and Moody's. It was June or July. It's very fresh and new. And so, yes, it does go on the bond market. However, they don't sell the bonds all at one time. So one thing that's very interesting that I have learned through this process is that what they do is they look at releasing them when the rate makes sense. And so they don't release them all at once. They don't look to try to recoup the funding on all of them at one time. They look to release them, and they monitor the market to make sure that Durham is getting the best value out of them. The other piece I'll add is that going back to Durham County and how good stewards they really have been of the taxpayers' dollars is that the original request from Durham Public Schools was almost at $200 million just for Durham Public Schools. And so the county commissioners decided that they didn't feel comfortable going with that full amount, and that's how they got back down to 90 for just Durham Public Schools, with a collective 170 for all 4 bonds. So basically what they're doing is they're taking the 2001 bonds that are about to expire, because these are 20-year bonds. They're taking the 2001 bonds and realizing that those are about to expire. They're putting these out on the market for us to be able to move forward with. But Durham's bond rating is so strong that we probably could have and would be approved for probably $500 million without a problem. Not that they would ever do that. But my point is they're very conservative with taxpayer dollars. The other piece I'll leave you with is when you talk about Durham Tech, one thing that I've learned through this process is that Durham Tech over the last 16 years, since 2001, the taxpayers have approved a little bit over $16 million, less than $17 million. When you compare that amount to the surrounding counties, they have a spreadsheet that shows that Wake County has approved $334 million for bonds. So Johnson County is actually about 100 and some change in millions of dollars. So the point is we're really going back and reinvesting in Durham Tech in a manner that we should have a few years back. But again, the county has been very conservative in terms of how it chooses to use taxpayers' dollars. This is at a 2.5% rate. And if they didn't take this method, I asked, well, what would be the solution? The solution and the alternative is that, as you know, you can't have students in schools that are falling apart. So the school piece, 3 out of 4 of these would definitely have to be addressed, and it would probably be addressed by an increase in a greater increase in taxes, property taxes. And so I asked, well, what would that amount be? They said probably between about 4 and 5%. So one thing that taxpayers really have to understand is I hate to say it like this because I don't represent the county, but one thing that I realize is that it's either pay me now or pay me later. And the question becomes is at what rate would we as taxpayers choose to pay at. And so personally, as a taxpayer whose taxes, who is just reassessed like everybody else in the county, I would rather pay at a 2.5 rate versus a 4 to 5% rate, if you can imagine.
Okay, that's good to know. And let me just ask you one more thing. This money that is going to come from the property owners, does that pay the interest on the bonds?
It's a great question. I believe it does. But I tell you what, even better than believing that it does, I don't want to speak out of turn here. I've got a one-pager that I'm more than happy to share with you, and it may be up on our website. I've got to see if it's out there. But I've got a full tax document. I believe it does take care of the interest as well. The county's really good about accounting for that within their math. I believe it does, because it's not quite 170. It's like 168 and some change, to be exact. But the round number is 170, and I believe that's the interest built into it.
Thank you.
You're certainly welcome. Thank you.
I'm about to, is this what I'm just looking at numbers. That was the first thing that popped up.
Right there. That's perfect. That's it.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Diana, for those questions. I have one question as well. You were talking about the community college, Durham Tech. So how does that compare exactly with other community colleges around the state?
So Durham Tech is has a much smaller footprint. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Durham Tech has a much smaller footprint when compared to other colleges, but I can give you some specific numbers real quick. Let me get this last page right here. I can live in numbers all day long. These are some great questions. Let me get this one document right here. I normally keep it with me. I have a spreadsheet of where every single dollar will go from the school system, as well as every other part of these bonds. Let me find the one document I'm looking for.
That's awesome.
Well, you know, we want to make sure that everyone knows. Right. All right. So here's great. All right. So right here in front of me, I have a document that I'll be glad to kind of show you all. But if you can see these numbers, that's the numbers when it compares to other counties. So at the top, you see Wake Technical, and you see that $332 million number. And then you look way down there and you see Durham Tech, which is right there. So we rank all the way down there compared to Wake and Central Piedmont, Cape Fear, Forsyth, Brunswick, Johnston, Pitt, then comes Durham in terms of bond funding. That's what that spreadsheet is saying to you.
Wow. So it'll be a good investment to our community.
Absolutely. And so to put it in perspective, so they've had Wake Tech, for example, has had 3 bonds. The last one was in 2012, and that's where they get the total for $332 million. Central Piedmont out of Charlotte has had 2 bonds, and their last one was in 2013. They have a total amount of $240 million. Cape Fear in Wilmington, Cape Fear alone in Wilmington went out for a bond in 2008, and they've had 1 bond. That 1 bond is $164 million. Forsyth in Winston-Salem has had 3 bonds for a total investment of $55.6 million. Brunswick in Brunswick County has had 1 bond for $30 million, and that was in 2004. Johnston and Smithfield has had 4 bonds for a total amount of $29 million, and their last one was in 2013. Pitt and Greenville has had 1 bond, and that was in 2013, and the total was $19.9 million. And then comes Durham Tech. We've had 2 bonds for a total investment of $16.9 million, and the last bond was in 2007. So as you can see, we've been very conservative here. Behind us is Rowan, Cabarrus, and Salisbury with 2 bonds for $15.1 million. Their last one was in 2010. and Nash and Rocky Mount has had one bond for an amount for a $9,500,000, and that was in 2012. So that kind of puts things into perspective. And now the irony related to this is so many of those community colleges I just mentioned are not located in metropolitan areas, right? And so when you're talking about being competitive and you're talking about what's happening within the Triangle, we're projected to see about 1 million people arrive in the Triangle by 2020. We will likely surpass that. We will likely surpass that. Durham County alone has a right at about 300,000, or we've tipped right at about 300,000 citizens. And so when you think about these numbers and how we remain competitive, and you talk about jobs that are scalable for all kinds of people, we've got to invest in the community college, because that's really the training ground for so many professions, whether it be from EMS to police. Durham Tech Northern Campus is used for training for both of those professions. And so those are the kinds of professions that don't cost you a lot of money, because they can train their own people. They don't have to outsource it or bring somebody else in. When you talk about the manufacturing that we see here, the manufacturing allows for us to be able to offer jobs on a variety of different price points. Whether you're at the administrative level, you're a C-level exec, all the way down to whether you're on the front lines. The challenge is we've got to, sometimes it's a transportation issue in making sure that we have a way for these men and women to get to where these companies are located, such as Traber Industrial Park. But the other half of it is also making sure they're properly trained. And so that's why investing in Durham Tech, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense, because it allows for you to have a fluid job market for all different kinds of people with all different kinds of backgrounds.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
Before I leave you all, if there are no other questions, one more anecdotal piece of information I just saw here. The last Durham Public Schools, let's go back to 2001. The past 3 bonds for Durham Public Schools, the first one was in 2001 for $52 million. You had one for in 2003 for $105 million, and then 2007 for $194 million. So that ought to help people to understand, kind of in perspective, where does the 90 million actually, weigh in on as it pertains to the last 4 bonds. But that's just specifically Durham Public Schools.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. One last check. Are there any other questions? Okay, and if not, John, I'd like to thank you for being here tonight. This has been very, very informative and helpful, especially for those of us who are able to vote here in Durham County. So thank you for